And the way to find them is to go to ilga.gov, click on the bottom right-hand corner, Administrative Rules, and then go to Chapter 35, where you will see the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, and we're in Title 35, Section 652 for the purpose of today's discussion. And if you do that, this is exactly what you will see, which is the entirety of the new rule that was adopted by the EPA. And now we'll break this down into each individual segment. So the purpose of this new rule of the EPA is, one, to specify electronic reporting requirements for community water supplies, provide rules for the prevention of environmental degradation that might occur when carrying out corrosion prevention and mitigation methods, and provide capacity development requirements pursuant to Section 15 of the Act. Before we dig too much deeper, I think it's important to take a look at what some of the definitions are for the purpose of this new rule. And not a lot of surprises here in the first couple of slides. Some interesting things that are directly related, but ACT is the Illinois EPA, Environmental Protection Act. Agency is the EPA. Capacity means the ability to plan for, achieve, and maintain compliance with applicable drinking water standards. And capacity has three primary components: technical, managerial, and financial. And in order to have adequate capacity, you must have capacity in all three areas. Next, we'll move into continue with some definitions. Corrosion essentially is a naturally occurring phenomenon, commonly defined as the deterioration of a metal that results from a chemical or electrochemical reaction with its environment. Corrosion prevention and mitigation methods means the preparation, application, installation, removal, or general maintenance as necessary of a protective coating system, including any or more of the following: surface preparation and coating application on the exterior or interior of a community water supply, or shot painting of structural steel fabricated for installation as part of a community water supply. A corrosion prevention project just means carrying out corrosion prevention and mitigation methods. And a corrosion prevention project does not include cleanup related to surface preparation. Continuing on with definitions, protective coatings personnel means personnel employed or retained by a contractor providing services covered by this part to carry out corrosion prevention and mitigation methods or inspections. And public water supply, this is essentially the meat. This is where the new rule really covers all of the elements associated with the community water supply. And essentially it means all mains, pipes, and structures through which water is obtained and distributed to the public, including wells and well structures, intakes and cribs, pumping stations, treatment plants, reservoirs, storage tanks, and apparatuses, collectively or severally, actually used or intended for use for the purpose of furnishing water for drinking or general domestic use, and which serve at least 15 service connections, or which regularly serve at least 25 persons at least 60 days per year. A public water supply is either a community water supply or a non-community water supply. And a community water supply essentially is just a public water supply which serves or is intended to serve at least 15 service connections used by residents, or regularly serves at least 25 residents. Non-community water supply means it doesn't meet that threshold. And then again, not anything out of the ordinary. Resident and state is exactly what you would expect to see here. So next, let's look into the applicability, and more specifically, let's look at what exactly the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency chose to exempt from these new rules. And this is the entirety of the exclusion of any rules that the EPA exempted, or types of work that the EPA exempted from this new rule. But this section does not apply to buried pipelines, including but not limited to pipes, mains, and joints. Routine maintenance activities of community water supplies, including but not limited to the use of protective coatings applied by the owner's utility personnel during the course of performing routine maintenance activities. And routine maintenance activities include but not are limited to the painting of fire hydrants, routine overcoat painting of interior and exterior building surfaces, such as floors, doors, windows, and ceilings, and routine touch-up and overcoat application of protective coatings typically found on water utility pumps, pipes, tanks, and other water treatment plant apparatuses and utility-owned structures. And finally, equipment or material purchased through a third party manufacturer or fabricated that is coded prior to purchase or delivery to the community water supply. Next, we get into the heart, or the real meat, red meat, you will, of the new rule. And these are essentially the 6 standards that the EPA adopted in order to protect Illinois community water supplies. And they include AWWA D103-09, which is factory coated carbon steel tanks for water storage. And essentially, this is requirements for the design, inspection, and testing of new cylindrical tanks. And B, AWWA D107-10, composite elevated tanks for water storage, describes the design and construction and inspection and testing of composite elevated water tank structures. Finally, moving into C, NSF ANSI 60-2014, drinking water treatment chemicals, describes the minimum requirements for the chemicals, the chemical containments and impurities directly added to drinking water. And D, directly below, is an extension of the above, of C. And moving to E, NSF ANSI 372-2011, drinking water system components, lead content, essentially establishes lead quality controls. And finally, moving into F, the industrial coating and lining application specialist qualification and certification. This worker certification is designed to certify individual craft workers that have experience and hands-on surface preparation and coating application of complex industrial and marine structures. It is a certification of excellence that elevates the industry standard by ensuring workers are properly trained and possess the requisite skills and knowledge to properly install complex coating systems. So all 6 of these elements, the EPA identified as critical to protecting Illinois community water supplies. And in fact, we're starting to now see engineers and architects and others begin to specify these 6 elements directly into their bid documents. Next, the corrosion prevention of community water supplies essentially just states that a community water supply must use protective coatings personnel to carry out corrosion prevention and mitigation methods on the following: exposed water treatment tanks, exposed non-concrete water treatment structures, exposed water treatment pipe galleys, and exposed pumps and generators. And then finally, in B here, we'll see that the EPA is mandating that inspectors must be utilized to ensure best practices and ensure that the standards in 652.21 are adhered to. Next, we'll move into the capacity portion of the new EPA rule. And there's, as we laid out in the very beginning, there's 3 primary areas that I identify whether or not a community water supply has proper capacity: the technical capacity, managerial capacity, and financial capacity. And we'll take a look at each one of these next. So for technical capacity, each public water supply must be able to demonstrate the following: that they are able to be in compliance with the standards for design, construction, and operation of public water supplies as required by 35 Illinois Administrative Code 604. Selection of a source that is economically reasonable, reliable, and adequate in quality and technically treatable to meet all proposed and existing state and federal drinking water standards based on an evaluation of potential sources of potable water. They must demonstrate compliance with ownership, certified operator, and responsible operator rules of 35 Illinois Administrative Code 603 and 681. And lastly, for technical capacity, must demonstrate compliance with applicable federal and state drinking water standards of 35 Illinois Administrative Code subtitle F. Moving forward to managerial capacity, each public water supply must demonstrate managerial capacity by providing the following: an organizational chart of the system that identifies responsible personnel, including both management and operational personnel, an operational management plan that A, describes operating procedures, B, identifies the personnel responsible for operation and management of the system, includes a description of the process to be used to identify and implement changes to current procedures, And D, identifies the process to be used to ensure that changes in responsible personnel are reported properly and properly implemented. 3, emergency management plan that includes identification of potential natural and human-caused risks to the water system, identification of personnel responsible for response actions, notification procedures, and public press relations. And C, measures for averting or avoiding emergencies and the means for implementing the emergency response plan. And 4, a training plan that assures ongoing training participation by all personnel. And lastly, the financial capacity. Each public water supply must demonstrate financial capacity by submitting the following: a budget developed for a 5-year period that includes at a minimum revenue income, operating expenses, capitalization expenses, reserves, capital improvements, and an emergency reserve fund. And 2, a description of income, investment, and disbursement procedures and fiscal management reports that ensure adequate fiscal management. And lastly, a financial plan that projects growth, potable water demands, and regulatory compliance. So that essentially is the new EPA rule governing community water supplies. And to take a deeper look into the employee certification portion of the new EPA rule, we're going to turn it over to Jennifer Merck and Stephen Lefevre for a presentation on worker certifications. So I will stop sharing my screen and we will turn it over to Jennifer and Steve.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Just want to say thank you for having me here to present on this. Just like Todd said, this presentation is going to focus a lot on the EPA rule section 652.210 on the painter blaster certification requirements. Just so you know, SSPC, the Society for Protective Coatings, and NACE International recently merged and became a nonprofit organization called AMP now, which is the Association for Materials Performance and Protection. So what you get with this is 2 nonprofits with over 65 years of experience with very similar missions. So I hope you enjoy this presentation, and Steve will probably take over about halfway through, but if you have, Steve, if you want to chime in anywhere, please go ahead. So one of AMP's missions is definitely industrial painter training for blasters and sprayers. We feel that there's this need for certification and training out there because of how sophisticated the coating systems have become. Some of them are 3-part coating systems, and the need for proper surface preparation is just key in the whole process of this. So besides developing and administering training and certification programs, we also develop industry consensus standards and hold different conferences and events throughout the world. SSPC and NACE were very well known for certifying painting inspectors, but we also are known for certifying blasters and painters. So there's different career pathways that you can look at whenever you get into this industry. And there's ones for project managers, superintendents, and this whole presentation is going to focus on the blaster and painter specifically. So this is the course and certification that is specified in the EPA section 652.210. It's the Coating Application Specialist program. So This was established in 2010, and it's based off an industry consensus standard. It's the ACS1-NACE 13 Applicator Certification Standard. So it's the first certification like this, really anywhere in the world, that is very specific to industrial blasting and painting. There's a pathway that you would follow throughout this program, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later on. But there's different ways that you could prep before you sit and take some of these exams. There's the industrial apprenticeship program that the union has. There's also a prep course called the Industrial Coding Applicator ICA program. So there's also internal training that a contractor can do to prep their candidates for the exam as well. So why is there a CAS certification program? So as I mentioned earlier, there's so many strict environmental requirements now, the sophisticated types of coatings, the cost of these coatings are very expensive. So the need to train and educate the workforce is essential. You need to have the proper cleanliness level on the surface of the steel before you can apply some of these coating systems. So this certification is going to give you a candidate at the end of it that is able to do a certain type of surface preparation and coating application. There's heavy emphasis on safety as well. So there's a lot of exam questions that's going to focus on safety because that's key. And one of the missions of AMP is to make sure that the workers are safe. The standard was also needed to define the industrial painter profession, because we're trying to attract workers into this profession as blasters and painters instead of the 4-year college degree track that some people may take. We want them to see this as a profession, and this is a very skilled type of labor that is required. So this certifies an individual as an industrial blaster and painter. The craft worker has to have experience to sit for these exams, and I'll get into that in a few slides. It also, the whole entire standard, the ACS 1 standard, was written in accordance to an ISO standard. What's important and what I want to bring up on one point on the ISO standard is that the proctor who is certifying the candidates cannot have trained the candidate. That is simply because there could be a conflict of interest. So we ensure that the students have not been trained by the proctor of the exam. The prerequisites to take this exam are as follows. There's different levels. I skipped the level 1 because actually there are no prerequisites to become a CAS level 1. It's a very basic certification, but when you get into the CAS level 2, there is a interim status. So we're looking for 2,000 hours of industrial blasting and spraying experience. You can also have the 150 hours of training as well. If you're unable to prove you have 150 hours of training, what happens is you could do process B, which is just straight field experience of 3,000 hours. We started out with this interim process because we were not sure if the industry was there yet for the full status version of the certification. The full status, again, has a process A and B, but you'll see that the hours are much higher. So whenever we launched this back in 2012, we had a ramp up and a lot of people entered into the program in that interim status. Now that the program has been around for almost 10 years, there's quite a few people who have converted over to the full status, which was a written exam that I'll explain to you in a few minutes. So the examination, I'm going to get into this panel here, but it's good that there's a photo here. All of the candidates need to blast and spray to an ASTM D4228 panel. This is usually a 4-foot by 5-foot panel with those parts welded onto it, because we're looking for them to not just be able to blast a flat surface. They need to be able to blast and spray a surface that is what you might encounter out actually in the field. Every candidate has their own panel. They have to do the whole panel themselves. And this is just someone demonstrating the abrasive blasting part of the exam. So the CAS level 1, like I indicated earlier, is a trainee, someone with limited knowledge. It's a written exam only. It's 50 questions. And it's recognized within the QP standard, which is another standard that I will get into a few slides from now. There's no hands-on component to the CAS level 1 exam. The CAS written exam, when you get into the interim and full status, the interim exam is 100 multiple choice questions, and the full status is 200 questions. The questions are basically covered in 4 categories: safety, surface preparation, coating application, and equipment. When you take the interim exam, those 100 questions are broken into groups of 25 questions per each category. So it allows someone maybe with a little less experience to be able to focus on 25 safety questions and 25 surface prep. When you move on to the full status exam, that's 200 questions. Those questions are not in any category. It could be a safety question followed by an equipment question. So it's a little all over the place, just because the experience level is going to be much higher for someone who's attending a full status exam. The written exams are translated into multiple languages. Languages are up on the screen. As we get requests for other languages, we work with a translation company and then also work with subject matter experts to ensure that all of the words are being translated technically correct. The hands-on exam for dry abrasive blasting, you have to use the ASTM D4228 panel. During the exam, the candidate will do abrasive blasting, and then usually outside of the spray booth is a table where you're going to have some basic inspection instruments like a sling psychrometer, which is going to help you with the temperatures in the air in the room. You're going to get into the nozzle orifice gauge. So there's going to be some basic inspection instruments there that the candidate is going to be expected to understand and be able to answer a couple of questions. They also have to identify the equipment and components all around them. They have to put on all of their PPE, and they also identify the setup of all of the blast pod and the hose and all the pieces around them as they're doing the blasting. They also answer some questions on basic quality control. The hands-on spray exam uses that same panel. So usually for the exam, all the panels are already painted and the students blast all of the panels and then they repaint them the next day. During the spray exam, the candidates will be using a wet film thickness gauge throughout. They'll be talking about if there's any coating defects that are occurring as they're doing the spraying. They have to do stripe coating. Again, there's basic inspection instruments that are sitting out as well. The day after the exam is over, the proctor does go in and do DFT readings per the SSPC PA2 standard. So they'll do dry film thickness readings in certain areas of the panel to ensure that the candidate met the thickness requirement. There are standards that the candidates need to look at on the table. So they're going to have the product data sheet sitting there, safety data sheets, and they'll be told the coating thickness that we're looking for them to adhere to based off of the coating that they're using to apply. A minimum grade of 70 is required on the written exam, and a minimum grade of 90% is required on the hands-on practical exams for you to be certified. If you fail one of the exams, you are able to retake that exam. As part of this program, there is a recertification element to the program. So for interim status, it's a 3-year term. And over that 3-year term, you do have to complete a minimum of 20 hours of training per year. Our website gives you a list of the formal training that you can submit over that 3-year term. It's a pretty broad list. You can submit OSHA training, toolbox trainings. It's a pretty lengthy list. When you go on to full status, again, it's a 3-term limit, or sorry, not limit, a 3-year term for full status. And the only difference here is that hours that are required per year go from 20 to 24 hours. If for some reason someone's not able to do the minimum of the 24 hours of training per year, they can retake the initial written and practical exams as well, instead of doing the 24 hours of formal training. In most instances, all the candidates have gone through over the past 10 years have been doing formal training over the years. Not many will repeat the exams again. So one of the most important parts of this program is the proctors. It's essential that the proctors are at a certain caliber. It's very important that the exam is administered equally all over the world as it's being administered. So right now, there are 88 approved proctors all over the world. You have to submit an application to AMP, have 5 years industrial blast and spray experience, be active within the industry. have hands-on knowledge of the tools, which is the blasting and spraying equipment. They also need to be a coding inspector level 2. And mostly that's because, they need to be able to evaluate the candidates when they're using the coding inspection instruments, and there is DFT readings the proctor has to take on the final day. They will participate in a Zoom interview, and the proctor, the very first time, must proctor the exam with another lead proctor before they're approved to ever do it by themselves. I'm going to talk a little bit about SSPC's QP program now. The QP program is much like an ISO 9001. So this isn't a certification that's for an individual, it's for a whole entire company. And why I bring this up is because to be a QP certified contractor, you need to have so many CAS certified people on staff. The QP program has been around since 1989. There's over 400 QP contractors in the United States. These contractors have been abiding by the requirements of CAS since its inception. Well, I guess since 2012, I'm sorry. So the CAS came out in 2010, and then in 2012, we implemented the requirements of CAS within the QP program. And I bring this up just so you know that there is a high quantity of CAS certified people in the United States and QP contractors as well that have been adhering to this requirement. We realized that the QP program was missing a very essential element, which is certifying of the craft worker, just because we know that there are a lot of coding failures that happen because of the poor surface preparation or coding application. So that's why CAS was implemented into the QP program. There are owners out there that will specify CAS and QP, like departments of transportation. They'll specify to work on a job, you have to be QP1 certified, which those owners know that they are then getting CAS certified candidates on the job site as well. We established a CAS in order to strengthen the qualifications of the current workforce and to lay the groundwork to develop a strong industrial painter workforce. The QP1 certified contractors already exist, like I said. So there is a market out there already of CAS certified individuals. And that's why I'm happy to see that the IEPA has implemented the CAS into their specifications. So the CAS, again, is one of the highest professional recognized certifications of a painter and blaster. It focuses very much on promoting a safe work practice, and a strong industrial painter workforce will go a long way towards improving the quality of the final outcome of the job. That the return on investment for the facility owner and the life of the structure, having proper surface preparation and protective coating application will help with that. So there's a couple of different ways that you can get the CAS certification or any of the pre-training that you think that the contractor workers need. You can attend a public offering of the exams, and you can go to our website to look for the different public offerings that are held within the whole United States. One of the other ways that a lot of contractors go is that they request a proposal for us to come to their facility to do the certification. A lot of contractors go that route because then the candidate is blasting and spraying with equipment that they're familiar with, and we come to their facility to do it. They also have the ability to schedule the exam at a time that's convenient to them as well. And then the third way is SSPC has worked with the Finishing Trades Institute going back all the way to 2000 in licensing a lot of our craft worker certification programs. So that is an established partnership. It's an amazing network that we're part of. And it's just another way that contractors have the ability to get the CAS exam. And I'm going to pass it over to Steve now.
Thanks, Jennifer. Oh, that reminds me of the first time we met about 10 years ago in this similar discussion. SSPC announcing the CAS certification program for the first time and what that meant to the QP1 contractors. Obviously, it was met with a short period of panic from the industry. We all want to know the who, the what, the why, but then ultimately we settled into how, right? How can we help QP1 contractors meet the demands of the industry? Luckily today, we're not talking about a new certification program. It's well established. We're talking about the new IEPA rule and how it applies to all those involved in protecting and preserving Illinois' community water supplies. But I'm sure many in the audience are feeling the same panic as we did back then, and have that same question of how do we certify those involved in the work. So thanks for inviting me really quickly to paint the picture of how the Finishing Trades Institute reacted back then, where we're at today, and ultimately how we can help in the future certifications for the corrosion prevention and mitigation industry in Illinois. I'm going to ask you, oh, you're on that slide. All right, perfect. So the Finishing Trades Institute, I think it might be one slide back there.
This one? Did I go too far?
I'll go one more.
Am I going the wrong
There we
way?
go.
All right,
Let's start
sorry.
there. Yeah, let's start there. The Finishing Trades Institute has long been a national training provider for contractors across the country and their workforce directly involved in corrosion mitigation prevention work and protective coating and lining application. We're internationally based in Hanover, Maryland, and we have FTI affiliate training programs and facilities located throughout the US and Canada. Feel free to slide forward. The FTI has always recognized SSPC as the leading authority for industry standards and their training and certification programs for protective coatings and personnel, along with NACE as leading authority for the industry standards and also their training and certification programs for coating inspectors. But when the two leading authorities in our industry come together on a joint standard, which is the ACS 1 NACE 13 regarding the industrial coating and lining application specialist qualifications and certifications, we knew it wasn't a matter of if, we knew it was a matter of when. When do we need to be ready? So shortly after 2010, we're talking SSPC unleashed the new CAS certification program, announcing that QP1 contractors were also required to have a certified workforce starting in 2012. So it obviously put us in these same discussions back then that we're kind of talking about now. Still have that little short panic period. We're learning the who, the what, the why. We're just talking IEPA right now, but luckily that was 10 years ago, and we've come a long way in the world of training and certification for corrosion prevention and mitigation personnel. We can skip slides. In order for our QP1 contractors at the time to meet the need of certified workforce across the country, the FTI partnered with SSPC. The FTI continued providing training. We worked directly with SSPC to approve FTI affiliate training facilities as CAS examination sites across the US and Canada. We can skip forward. With approved CAS examination sites across the US, we then had to figure out the most efficient route of certifying our existing QP1 contractor base and their workforce. So phase one, we focused on what we consider the low-hanging fruit. We began hosting CAS level 2 interim status exams for that existing workforce that had considerable knowledge and experience in the industry. Moving into phase two, we knew the ultimate goal was CAS level 2 full status. That clearly raised the bar for the industry as a whole, being a much more comprehensive knowledge-based test along with the hands-on examinations as well for both spray and blast. We realized that not only experience is needed, but additional training would be necessary for the existing workforce to be successful for full status. So FTI affiliate programs began developing prep courses to help raise that level of knowledge of the existing workforce. And I'm happy to announce that the FTI has successfully hosted CAS exams in 50 cities around the US and Canada, resulting in thousands of CAS certifications today. We'll move on to the next. As mentioned earlier, it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. When will this spread beyond QP1 contractors and further into the industry? So we began to focus on how we could build capacity, not only for our QP1 contractors, but the industry as a whole. So shortly after, the U.S. Department of Labor recognized the painter/industrial coating and lining application specialist as a separate apprenticeable occupation. And FTI affiliates began developing and registering registered apprenticeship programs to begin training and certifying the future workforce. We can move forward. One slide. Thank you. So to start bringing it down to that local level, I'm the Director of Apprenticeship and Training for the North Central Illinois Finishing Trades Institute, located in Aurora, Illinois. We are only one of 4 FTI affiliates that are in Illinois. The NCI FTI is nationally accredited by the Council on Occupational Education, and in turn, we're recognized by the U.S. Department of Education as well. So in 2014, we launched our industrial coating and lining application specialist as a registered apprenticeship program. We can move forward. And to keep this brief, the NCI FTI apprenticeship is 3 years in length. It combines a minimum of 480 hours of related technical instruction with a minimum of 4,650 hours of on-the-job training. Ultimately, we begin with CAS level 1 for the basics, typically in the beginning of the first year, and our program ends with CAS level 2 full status upon completion of the apprenticeship program. We can move to slide 40, please. So I'm proud to say that in Illinois, we have 4 FTI affiliate training providers, all working towards building capacity for Illinois. We have 5 SSPC approved CAS examination sites across the state in Illinois, located in Chicago, Aurora, Milan, Collinsville, and also Decatur. Currently, the 4 FTI affiliates in Illinois have achieved a combined total of 300 CAS certified workers in Illinois and have more CAS exams scheduled now and through March before the season begins. Not to mention the additional exams and certifications that SSPC has achieved through their training centers and, like you said, directly with corrosion prevention and mitigation contractors of Illinois. We can move on to the next. So these are really just a couple of pictures. I know we're limited on time, but just to give you just a visual of what these exams look like, it's not just taking a test and knowledge based on a piece of paper. It is truly hands-on and a full explanation of every piece of equipment that the corrosion prevention and mitigation personnel would come in contact and use to preserve and protect the water supplies of Illinois. We can move on one more slide. So the FTI also has several affiliates that border Illinois to help out in this cause. Locations surrounding Illinois: Milwaukee, Madison, Wisconsin, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, St. Louis, Missouri, and then up the line of Indiana with Evansville, Indianapolis, and Maryville. So, with that said, I just want to make sure everybody knows that we're here to help. We're here to help SSPC and AMP continue to certify Illinois' corrosion prevention and mitigation workforce and protect and preserve the community water supplies of the great state of Illinois. So with that said, thanks, Jennifer. I'll turn it back over to you and go from there.
I'm good as well. Thank you. And we're open to any questions. We can have exams usually held within 21 to 30 days at your facility for when you need them. But like Steve said, we have been certifying people for over 10 years to this program. So we've heard every question there could be, and we're here to help you through it and make it as simple as possible.
Thank you. I think that's very compelling, and it's exciting to see that the Illinois EPA has taken such a tough stance in protecting community water supplies and guarantees that the individuals performing this work have the requisite skills, in addition to all of the other components of the new rule. With that, I think we would like to transition now into a conversation, or Rick Lieber has a presentation that he's going to deliver on best practices and share some of his experience of having spent over 40 years in the industry working as one of Illinois' leading engineers. So we'll turn it over to Rick.
Okay, thanks, Todd. Yeah, I guess as Todd had said at the beginning, I've been in the water and wastewater industry my whole career, 40 plus years. Been in the coatings industry pretty much the same as water and wastewater goes hand in hand with coatings. And so I'm going to talk today and direct a lot of my presentation, I'll say here, toward the actual infrastructure owners. And because I think the CAS is very important to you as the infrastructure owners. And I'll kind of tie that all together as we go along here. But I always like to start off with a story, and stories are important, I think. Maybe it goes back as humans, we relate to each other through stories. Maybe it was when we used to sit around in the cave around the campfire and tell stories to one another. I don't know, but it always seems to work pretty well. But a story that I have and I like to relate is a story that kind of affected me profoundly in this business, and that is how coatings and the lack of coatings affect the financial or the impact that they have on the financial status or whatever of a community. And about 20 years ago, I was regional superintendent at a wastewater plant, and we were looking to replace some of our equipment. And I was out at another wastewater treatment plant with an equipment representative, and we wanted to look at what's called a bar screen. And a bar screen at a wastewater treatment plant is in the headworks, or the beginning portion of the plant. It's one of the first processes that in a wastewater treatment facility. And so we went into this wastewater treatment plant. I won't name any names, but it was in the area, and a fairly large wastewater treatment plant. And when I walked in the door to this headworks building, I noticed that there was rags and there was debris and everything laying all over the floor, and that should have been in a dumpster. And I wondered why that was happening. And so I started looking around at the equipment, and the conveyor system that conveyors the rags and the sticks and the other floatables that these bar screens remove is transferred from the bar screen, where the bar screen collects it, to dumpsters by a conveyor system. And the conveyor system, I noticed, had corroded substantially, rotted out on the sides. And so it was no longer able to keep all of the waste material on the conveyor to make it to the dumpster, and it was falling off onto the floors. And we walked in, and the superintendent who was with us, he saw me looking around, and he apologized, and he said, geez, I really want to apologize that the facility looks like this. He said, we're in the process of replacing those conveyors. And I looked at the conveyors, and I'm thinking, okay, how old are these? And I said, well, can I ask a question? How long have those been here? And he said, well, they've been in service now for about, and he said, I'm not quite sure, but 3 to 5 years. And I went, ooh, 3 to 5 years, okay. And I said, well, can I ask a question? What's that going to cost you? And he said, well, and again, keep in mind, this is 20 years ago. And he said, well, it's going to cost us probably around $200,000 to replace those conveyors. And it really struck me, because I looked at the coatings that were on these steel conveyors, and it looked like I'll say the primer that comes with the conveyor when it's delivered to the site in primer. And so clearly nothing had been painted above and beyond that. And I looked at that and I thought, geez, $200,000+ for the want of some preventive maintenance and some coatings applied to that. If that had been done, they probably would have been able to put off that expenditure for another 15 years at least. So with that, how does that lead into the CAS, and how does the CAS certification of workers affect you? Okay. And so to do that, I want to go back and I know we've talked about Todd talked about what the rules is now for the CAS certification. But I want to talk a little bit about not just for water systems, because that, and we'll talk a lot about, or I'll talk a lot about water systems because it's near and dear to my heart. But I want to talk about infrastructure, other infrastructure, because I think the CAS plays not just to the water sector as the law states, but it plays to all of or many different areas of infrastructure. And so what is infrastructure? So Webster defines infrastructure as the system of public works of a county, state, or region. Okay, it's kind of broad. So the way I look at it is water, and I think we've talked about that, but certainly water treatment plants, water storage tanks, elevated water towers, piping, all the type of things that goes into the actual treatment process. We also look at, as I just kind of described part of it, wastewater treatment plants. Wastewater collection systems, lift stations. You can look at bridges out there, and same thing with lights, community lights, street lights, traffic signals, those type of things. And so that's what I would look at as far as or look at as far as infrastructure. And when you look at that infrastructure, you have to look at the fact that all of those systems that I've just described are very expensive. They're very expensive to construct. They're very expensive to replace. Not to mention, if corrosion causes those pieces of infrastructure to fail, and have to be taken out of service or have to be replaced on an emergency basis. Now it puts the whole community in a lot of ways, especially when you talk about water and wastewater, at risk. Certainly from sanitary, health standards, all of that type of thing. So we're talking about tens of millions of dollars that go into these systems. And with that investment, I think it's really important to talk about how we need to protect that, to prolong that life. The residents of the community, of all of the communities, are who pay for all of this. And so it's important as good, I'll say, public stewards or whatever, to take care of that infrastructure the best as possible. And so one of the things in taking care of it is we have to face, I'll say, the enemy of all infrastructure, and that enemy is corrosion. And corrosion, corrosion in the United States costs over $500 billion a year in damage to infrastructure, transportation, you name it. Well over trillions of dollars in internationally, globally. And so we're up against a formidable opponent when it comes to corrosion. And so it was discussed before what corrosion is: electrochemical process, natural process, which converts a refined metal into a more chemically stable form, such as oxide, hydroxide, or sulfide. And if you've noticed in or looked at corrosion, and it's funny how much I look at corrosion all the time. My family picks on me all the time because even when we go on vacation, I'm looking for corrosion. So, but that's just me. It's important to look at that corrosion, because the corrosion is trying to break that metal down into its original state. And if you think about it, when steel is created in a steel mill, there's a lot of energy that goes into turning the iron ore into a molten metal where all of the carbon and the other things are combined into steel, and various different types of steel combine different things into it. But a lot of energy goes into it. And so when that steel is produced and it comes out of the mill, it has all that energy into it. And corrosion is basically trying to turn that steel and take that energy and the electrochemical process and turn it back into its raw state again, into its natural state. And so it's good to consider that. And it's also good to consider that when steel, and that's what we talk about, because much of the infrastructure that we have in our country and in communities, wastewater plants, water plants, is all steel or is made from steel. And in that steel, when it comes from the mill, there's four basic areas that are needed in order for a corrosion cell to develop. Okay, and those are a cathode, which is a positive ion area, an anode, which is a negative ion area, and a metallic pathway. When steel comes from the mill, it already contains those. All right, they're present in the steel. Okay, there is actually cathodic areas in the steel, anodic areas in the steel, and of course the steel itself is the metallic pathway. The fourth missing part is an electrolyte. An electrolyte being moisture or water. Okay, and when you combine all four of those, or when all four of those are present, a corrosion cell can develop. And I say that just so everyone can understand what has to develop, or how we can protect steel and steel products from the effects of corrosion. And the best way, obviously, to do that is by blocking that electrolyte from ever reaching the steel substrate. And we do that with coatings. Okay. There's also cathodic protection, and that plays into it, or can play into it as well, like in water tanks and now in some bridge materials, things like that. But the thing that's most commonly used is coatings. And so in order for those coatings to provide the kind of protection that we want them to be, and Jennifer alluded to that in her discussion, was coatings are very expensive. The new coating systems that are out there, they're very protective, okay, and they can do their job very well, but they are expensive. And so we need to make sure that number one, the right coatings are specified for the right process or the right infrastructure and the environment that infrastructure lives in. If it's, as I had talked about before, in a headworks of a wastewater treatment plant where hydrogen sulfide gas is very corrosive. It turns into, when combined with moisture, turns into sulfuric acid, and it can break down steel, it can break down coatings, it can break down concrete. And so it's important to specify the right coating system to the actual application. Okay, and so I'll say a properly trained and certified coating person should be the person who's specifying those coatings, okay, and putting that together. The other thing, and that this is where we get into the CAS and how the CAS is related to this, is the preparation and the application of those coatings is so important. And it's so important in the field. As a coating inspector, I see this on a regular basis. When we get called to go to existing facilities that have had coatings applied to them, and those coatings have failed. 80+% of coating failures come from improper surface preparation. And so we want to make sure that before an application of coatings goes on, that surface is prepared properly. And I think Steve and Jennifer both showed pictures of the training that goes on, showing the CAS trainees, I'll say, candidates on proper blasting and going through all of that. And it's so important, because if that surface isn't prepared properly, the coating has nothing to adhere to. And that's where coatings fail. And when coatings fail, now it costs that much more in order to, again, prepare the surface and reapply the coatings. And so again, very important aspects of that. I've been to the school, and at least one of the schools in the area, and I know from seeing that it's a rigorous training, in that all of the candidates there have to go through all of the processes that they'll be using in, I'll say, in the real world. And one of the things I'll just share quickly, I was very impressed with, was they use a virtual training system for the CAS candidates to learn how to apply coatings. And very impressive in that they end up painting sections of a bridge or whatever that are very detailed with angles and flat areas, everything like that. But the computer actually gives them real-time feedback as to places that they missed, or where the coating that they're applying is too thin, that type of thing. So again, I just wanted to reiterate that the coatings are, or the training, I'm sorry, for the coatings and for the surface preparation is very rigorous and very, very worthwhile. all definitely important areas of knowledge that these candidates will need when they're in the real world working for contractors. As an inspector working with coating application firms, we see a major difference between actual trained coating applicators and surface preparers versus non. And what's important for us is that as inspectors, we learn that if a contractor is not trained, the contractors are not CAS trained, basically, that we have a tendency to have to watch their moves that much closer. And we have to make sure that from a surface application, surface preparation and coating application standpoint, that we're watching them closely. And that goes for everything from mixing the coatings, making sure that the thinner and the mixing is all properly done, to the actual application. And because you'll run into situations with untrained people where there'll be heavy mill thickness of paint in one area and other areas that don't even meet the specification. So I just want to I guess kind of finish up with that, in that it's so important to have CAS trained painters on your projects. Make sure that they are now, obviously it's the law, but make sure that there are no exemptions to that. It's important for protecting your infrastructure and the investment that you have in that infrastructure. There's an old commercial, and this always, to me, stands true. there's a mechanic working on a car and working under the hood of a car. And that mechanic turns around and he says, you know, it's really important for a car or for the owner of a car to change his oil properly and use the proper filter. And he then looks back at the engine of the car and he says, and this owner did not have a good filter. And then they cut to a close-up of a Fram oil filter. And the mechanic looks at the filter and then looks back at the camera and says, Fram oil filters, you can pay me now or pay me later. and I relate that to kind of the same thing in maintaining your infrastructure. You can make sure that your infrastructure is maintained properly. You can do that in a number of ways. Like other maintenance, do regular inspections. Have regular inspections of all your infrastructure done. Have it done by a qualified, certified NACE, SSPC, and now AMP certified inspector, number one. Number two, use the properly designed surface preparation and coating systems. And number three, above all, use a properly certified contractor to do the job. And because like the commercial for the Fram oil filter, you can pay us now or you can pay us later. And so with that, I will turn it back over to you, Todd.
That's great, Rick. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your vast experience and sharing some stories with us. And certainly the oil filter commercial rings true today, just as it did so many years ago. So we're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is great because I think that's going to leave some time for some Q&A. We have had several questions pop up during the course of today's program that we'll get to. And so the first question was, is this event being recorded? If so, will it be sent to us? The answer is yes, it is being recorded. We will have it up on the tcdfillinois.org website within the next couple of days. So be looking for it there. It'll also be on the TCDF YouTube channel, which you can find by going to YouTube and plugging in Tri-Council Development Fund. So it'll be there. Please disseminate it as far and wide as you think people could benefit from it. Next, we have a project out for bid for the exterior painting of our elevated water tanks. Will this be considered routine maintenance? So therefore our tanks are exempt from this corrosion rule. The Illinois EPA adopted this specific corrosion rule on November 9th, 2020, and any project being let for bid that does not fall under routine maintenance overcoat is subjected to these new rules. So in other words, if your maintenance personnel are performing this particular project, then no, this rule would not apply. If they are not, and you're looking to hire a contractor to perform the work, then these rules do apply. In fact, this conversation has come up quite a bit over the last several weeks, and in working with the EPA and several engineering firms, some in central Illinois, some from downstate Illinois, what they're doing is just issuing addendums to their bid documents, ensuring that all of the elements of 65221 are adhered to and incorporated into those. So I hope that helps answer that specific question. What is AMP again? It's the Association for Materials Protection and Performance, which is the new merger of what was SSPC and NACE. They came together and decided that one group made the most sense to protect all of the work that goes on in the corrosion industry generally. And we're excited about the merger. There's still, I think I would refer to Jennifer for just a moment, but I think some of the mechanics of the merger are still being hammered out, but it's an exciting time for what is the new AMP. So Jennifer, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, we have some transition teams that are working right now with some product lines that were the same. So we're taking the best of both product lines and combining them. We had a lot of separate programs that didn't touch each other. So those ones are kind of running as is right now. But yeah, just work with us. We're working on communication plans. There's also town hall meetings happening all the time. So if you go to SSPC or NACE's website, you can attend one of those town halls or listen to a pre-recorded video of the town hall.
Terrific. Thank you. Does the new bill require a QP1 requirement or have CAS language? The new rule mandates that SSPC ACS 1 NACE number 13 industrial coding and lining application specialist qualification and certification must be adhered to, as well as all other components of section 652.21. And it looks like maybe we've got a couple more. Why, I think this might be for you, Rick. Why is a 3-coat system key to the longevity of an industrial coating project?
A 3-coat system typically provides, and I'll use what we specify on water tanks a lot, and that is a zinc-based primer. And that zinc-based primer acts as a if moisture and even though coatings are appear to be solid, eventually moisture will make their way through the coatings, and in doing that, the zinc will act as a sacrificial anode to the substrate. So the zinc will sacrifice itself first before the steel will start to corrode. Second, an intermediate coat of epoxy. Epoxy is typically a hard shell coating and provides a good, I'll say, armor for it. And then finished off with a urethane top coat, and that urethane top coat can be like a fluoropolymer top coat that'll provide UV protection and provides for a longer, a glossier finish, and that type of a scratch resistant, that type of a top coat. So a 3-coat system provides good protection for that, for infrastructure like that.
Terrific.
I don't
Thank
know
you.
if that answers the question, but
I think so. Next, do locally funded projects have to abide by this standard, or is this only for state funded projects? I missed the first 10 minutes, so if this has been covered, then I apologize. Unfortunately, there are some out-of-state engineering firms that seem to be advising their clients that locally funded projects are exempt. Well, the best place to look for that answer is directly into the standard itself, which, of course, if we look at what the definition of a community water supply is, which is, again, to find this standard or this rule, you would go to ilga.gov. On the right-hand side of the screen, you would scroll down to administrative rules. Illinois EPA is chapter 35. You'll click on chapter 35 and then scroll down to section 652, where you will see the entirety of the new community water supply rule adopted by the EPA. The answer to the question is yes, it applies if you meet the definition of a community water supply. And just so I get it exactly correct, let me go ahead and just cover it for a second here. Sorry, bear with me. I have a lot of PowerPoint here. A community water supply means a public water supply which serves or is intended to serve at least 15 service connections used by residents or regularly serves at least 25 residents. I could tell you that even in situations where water supplies are managed by third-party folks, Illinois American to name one, and others, this standard applies to them as well, or this rule applies to them as well. So I hope that answers that question. Next, I think this might be for Jennifer. What will CAS Level 3 comprise of?
I was writing some of it in the bot so they could see the answer I'm writing as well. So the CAS, it's going to be comprised of, you have to take 3 specialty modules. This is like you becoming a specialized type of blaster or sprayer. So There's 7 to choose from: water jetting, plural component, concrete coating, thermal spray, pipeline coating, electrostatic, and powder coating. So you would take 3 out of those 7 courses and prove that you can pass those 3 exams, and then you show that you have 8 years experience, and that's what's going to get you to that level 3 certification. Right now, no one's specifying the level 3. Those courses are developed, and I think at least 5 out of the 7 you could take right now, but we haven't actually launched that element of the program.
Terrific. Looks like there's another question. Your QP1 answer was vague. Are contracting companies required to be QP1, or can non-QP1 company who employs CAS workers be considered in compliance? The answer to that is it does not mandate QP1, the new EPA rule. It does, however, mandate that those specific employers must employ individuals who maintain the CAS and NACE joint standard certification. So hopefully that answers that. Does anybody want to elaborate on that? No,
I don't think it is requiring QP1. I think
it's not.
you might get it. You might get a QP contractor to bid just because a lot of them have a 10-year head start on having certified craft workers already. So you might automatically get one, but I don't see it saying QP specifically.
Yeah, it is absolutely not. And the best place to look for that is 652.21.0 in the new regulation or the new rule.
Yeah, I don't interpret QP1 being required either. We use that as an example because that's where QP1 contractors were 10 years ago, trying to figure out how to certify their workforce. Obviously, I believe QP1 contractors are somewhat a prime choice for this type of work because, like Jennifer said, they've been doing this now for 10 years with a certified workforce, but not required as part of the new rules.
Terrific. Well, it looks like our Q&A queue is empty, so we'll just close. So I'd like to just say thank you to everyone who took time out of your day to join us for today's program. I'd like to especially thank our all-star lineup of industry experts. We hope you found today's program to be informative and useful to all of you as you continue to work towards protecting Illinois state and local infrastructure assets. Please mark your calendars for our next event, which will take place on March 18th from 1:30 to 3, where the Corrosion Illinois Network and the Tri-Council Development Fund will present Illinois Construction Industry Outlook and Opportunities, where industry experts from Ernst & Young will take a deep dive into emerging opportunities in the state and municipal infrastructure sector. Topics will include Illinois Capital Bill funding and outlook, historical trends in Illinois infrastructure funding sources and spending, and an overview of federal infrastructure spending under the new Biden administration. Information on the event will be available soon at tcdfillinois.org. And with that, thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. The presentation will be posted on the TCDF website within the next couple of days. And as always, please reach out to the Tri-Council Development Fund if you have any questions. We're happy to hear. We're a resource to you. And so you can send questions to info@corrosionillinois.com, and we will get back to you as soon as we possibly can. So with that, thank you all very much. Stay safe and look for us March 18th. Thank you.